My son, Richie, was almost 3 years old with beautifully thick and curly brown hair that seemed to hang in place flawlessly without any serious effort. He was a growing, healthy, and happy child with a rapidly developing vocabulary, as any parent would hope for. That, however, was before Frank seeped into our lives. Before Frank, the boy loved talking anyone's ear off, running around like a maniac, and putting on superhero masks while pretending to fight bad guys. That's why when he first started talking about the monster, I never thought much of it, as it's expected for children his age to start developing an overactive imagination. "Daddy, do you see the monster?" Richie said for what must be the 7th time in the past couple weeks. "Yeah, buddy," I replied, with that encouraging, yet slightly sarcastic voice that parents make when talking to young children. "I can see him." "What's his name, Daddy?" Frank," I told him, lazily spouting out the first generic name that popped into my mind. Richie then rambled off to the next subject, and talked about something like Spider-Man or Ninja Turtles beating up bad guys. You know, typical little boy stuff. The Frank sightings seemed to escalate from there. Richie would ask me or his mother if we could see Frank over there standing in the corner, or mention that Frank was in his room last night. It was at this point that I started to feel a bit of concern. It didn't seem to be a huge deal, but it was starting to get a bit, well, off-putting. Frank was never playing, he was just there. I decided to ask Richie some questions about what I believed to be his imaginary friend he called Frank, but I'd wait until the next time he brought it up on his own. That opportunity arose one day as I picked him up from daycare and we were driving home. He had mentioned that Frank was at the sandbox that day. "Is Frank your friend?" I asked him. "No," he responded, "Frank is a monster." "A monster?" "Yeah, Frank is a monster. He's a nice monster though." "He looks funny." Deciding to dig a little deeper, I asked, "Does Frank play with you?" "No." "Well then what does he do?" "Frank watches us." He said it with a matter-of-fact demeanor that left me even more unsure of this weird situation. I'm a young first-time parent in my mid-20s, and I had no idea how to handle the imaginary friend situation. Should a parent play along, or be more realistic? I really didn't want to hinder the development of his imagination, but I also wasn't sure how far I felt comfortable with this going. "Sometimes he talks," Richie continued after a short pause. "At night when everyone is asleep." "Oh great, he's dreaming about Frank too." "Well, what does Frank like to talk about?" "He said we shouldn't move to a new house." "What did he just say?" That last shocking sentence made me feel unsettled at best. We were getting ready to put our townhouse on the market, as we were ready to upgrade to a larger home. The weird thing is, my wife and I hadn't spoken to our son about this. We were waiting to tell him until we had found the house that we would purchase, to make the situation easier for a toddler to grasp. Feeling creeped out and somewhat awkward, I immediately changed the subject by asking Richie if he wanted a cookie. It may be a cheap trick, but any child will immediately forget about anything of the moment you bring up the possibility of a cookie. Although the subject had been changed, my mind began to wonder. Was my son speaking with some sort of ghost? I believed that ghosts might exist, but had never seen any sort of significant proof. How did he know that we were moving? Later that night, after Richie was in bed, I explained to my wife the conversation that had taken place in the car. She, however, seemed unfazed and somewhat skeptical. She blew it off by saying, "Oh, I'm sure he just overheard us. That kid never goes to bed and is more attentive than you think." I suddenly realized how insane I must have sounded to think that some sort of ghost was speaking with our child. It almost seemed funny to look back and realize that I was actually worried. Perhaps my belief in the paranormal had caused me to jump to conclusions too easily without any real rationality. I was a first-time parent after all, with almost no previous experience dealing with small developing children. I reminded myself to calm down and stay rational. Things carried along, business as usual, for the next several weeks. Richie's mentions of Frank varied from 1 to 3 times a day. I simply played along with the boy and his stories of his imaginary friend. We packed our things and moved to our new house, which came with a wonderful swing set for which Richie was ecstatic. In this house, I felt certain that it could be our forever home. I believed that we would be happy here. It had been 3 weeks since we had moved in, and we had just celebrated Richie's 3rd birthday. The boy was flourishing, increasing his outstanding vocabulary and easily identifying all of his shapes and colors. He could even count to 50 now. The best thing was, I hadn't heard the name, Frank, mentioned since we moved it. Not once. Not once, that is, until a mid-Saturday morning in the early onset of fall. The leaves were starting to rest on our new backyard lawn, and I once again found myself pushing Richie on his swing set. Back and forth, with the rhythmic squeak of the swing set. This is when everything took a turn for the worst. "Daddy, look!" Richie exclaimed. "There's Frank. He's here now." Richie pointed to the far back corner of the yard, right next to the shed. As I turned my head to look, I thought I actually saw something that appeared to be a large silhouette. Before I had time to fully comprehend what I had seen, I heard the thud of Richie hitting the ground, followed by the cries of pain. A few hours later, the doctor entered the room with the x-rays in hand, confirming his suspicions of a broken arm. Luckily, it was one clean break. No setting of the bones would be needed. Although my son was going to be okay, I was livid with myself for allowing this to happen. How could I have been so stupid as to look away from my child while he was on the swing set, right after he let go of the chain to point at his imaginary friend? This whole situation could have been avoided had I not been so superstitious about this damned imaginary friend. But wait, I had seen something, hadn't I? It was only for a split second, but it was there. A tall, large shadow of a man with deformed head. Ugh, my eyes must really have been playing tricks on me. I brushed it off and eventually managed to fall asleep, pushing the parental guilt off to deal with the following day. Sleep proved to be just as unsettling as the day's events had been, though. My dreams brought me memories of the recent past. The swing set, Richie playing in our old house, having family over for holiday celebrations, even the day we brought baby Richie home for the first time. Except that hideous monstrous silhouette was there in every single memory. Watching from the corner, standing behind our guests, leaning over the crib. Always there, always watching. I awoke suddenly, bolt upright in my bed. I rarely remembered even having dreams, but this dream was so vivid, so clear, that every detail now haunted my thoughts. Needless to say, falling back asleep was not an option. I had to go do something to set my mind at ease. Disturbed, I went over to check on my little Richie, who was supposed to be asleep. Partially to comfort myself from that horrendous nightmare. To my surprise, I found the boy wide awake. When he saw me peeking through the doorway, he asked, "Daddy, where is hell?" "What?" I asked in disbelief, sure that I must have misheard. "Hell," he said, "where is hell?" I was not prepared to answer these kinds of questions to my child yet, he was so young. I myself have never really been sure what I believe about this heaven and hell stuff, having never been religious. But I gave him the best, simple explanation I could muster. "Well, bud, nobody really knows where hell is, but some people believe that hell is a place where bad people go after they die." "So was your daddy a bad guy?" "Excuse me?" This last question caught me off guard. "Frank told me that your daddy is in hell because he hurt those kids." My heart instantly plummeted, providing a sensation as if it had collided with my stomach. After skipping a beat, or 3, my heartbeat resurged with the powerful thump worthy of a bass drum. How the hell could he have known about that? It was true that my father had hurt children. Killed them, actually. When I was young, about 12 years old, my dad had stormed out of the house in a drunken stupor. The police came knocking at about 5 a.m. the next morning to inform us that he had been identified as involved in a multiple fatality car accident, and they needed my mother to identify the body. I remember that morning vividly. My mother was not aware that I had woken, as I hid around the corner listening to the police tell my mother of my father's demise. Needless to say, it was him. As details emerged, it became apparent that my father had drunkenly caused a car accident, slamming into a family's minivan as they were coming home from a fishing trip. My father, along with the 2 children in the backseat of the other car, were killed instantly. As much as my mother tried to shield me of the events, it was all over the news. I was 12 after all, and I knew how to use the internet. It didn't take long for me to know what my dad had done. That being said, there is absolutely no way that my son would have known this story. My mother remarried years before Richie was born. My stepfather is the only person my son has ever known as grandpa, and I never discussed the situation at all. At this point, I realized, without a doubt, that Frank was more than just an imaginary friend, and it angered me. Furiously, I told my son, "No more talking to Frank, he's not welcome here." "But Frank is nice," Richie pleaded. "No, Frank is not nice. Frank is bad, and if you see him again, you need to tell him to leave." "No!" Richie roared. Only the voice that came out did not belong to Richie. It was a sound that no toddler could be capable of making. It was a deep, dark, horrendous, malicious, and rocky voice that would be fitting of a werewolf, or a monster, or a demon. What's worse is the fiery, despicable, evil look of pure hatred that was in my son's eyes, although only for a moment, it was there. The expression on his face disappeared as quickly as it arrived, and Richie was Richie again. It was as if he had no idea what had just happened. He seemed totally fine, but I was terrified. Terrified of my only son, or whatever had just taken a hold of him. "Can I watch a movie?" he asked, completely unfazed by the event. It was as if he didn't even realize what had happened. Of course, buddy," I managed to respond with a shaky voice. I carried him to the living room and put on Lion King for him. After he fell asleep in the next 30 minutes, I went into the shower and simply fell apart as I broke into tears. What the hell had just happened? What was this monstrous thing who grabbed a hold of my son? As I tried to explain the events to my wife the ensuing morning, she simply didn't believe me. I can't even blame her. I realized that it sounded crazy, but I knew that it had indeed happened. If only she had believed me. However, we had very little time to talk about it, as Richie awoke that morning with a heavy fever. Originally at 101 degrees Fahrenheit, his temperature rapidly rose to 103 within just a couple short hours. As I picked my son up to take him to the ER, I saw him, Frank, out of the corner of my eye, watching. Richie was admitted immediately. The doctors scrambled to explain his condition of rapid deterioration. I sat by, watching as my son became pale and his energy was fading. Fast. Yes, my son was fading. He was dying. As the doctors ran tests on top of tests, I took matters into my own hands. I had 3 different priests arrive, all of them simply offered my son a simple blessing, but I could tell that they too were skeptical of me. I tried desperately to get my wife and the doctors to listen to me. For 2 days, I pleaded with them to understand that I knew what was wrong, that there was a malicious, if not demonic, entity feeding on my boy, sucking away his life energy. Why or how were questions in which the answer far passed my understanding, but it was happening. I could even see him regularly now, that evil thing, standing in the shadows. But alas, I was met with skepticism, and my wife along with the doctors ended up bringing in a psychologist to have some sort of intervention for me. They tried to tell me that I was having some sort of mental break from the stress of a sick, possibly dying, child. I stormed out that room desperately furious. I realized in this moment that trying to explain the truth to people would be of no avail. I had only one last idea of what could be done, what had to be done to save my Richie. I stayed awake in the hospital room that night. It had been almost 3 days now since we arrived at the hospital. Richie has been moved to the ICU, with the doctors still baffled. All their tests had only shown what wasn't wrong with Richie. They didn't understand, but I knew. I knew what was wrong with my son. I sat there, waiting for the demon called Frank to appear. I stayed awake until about 2 a.m., and suddenly there he was. I could see the shadow standing over Richie's bed. He stood calmly, but with an evil lust for the last little bit of energy that was keeping my son alive. "I'll make you a deal," I said with a stern and confident done. The entity slowly turned his head until he was facing me. I could see him now, more clearly than ever. Richie was right, Frank truly was a monster. A large one, standing at some 8 feet tall, with skin the color of ash. He had the same overall shape of a human, but with hideous, pointy features. His long, narrow arms hung down to his knees, ending with fingers 6 inches or more in length. And his face, his ungodly face, was the most hideous of all. Frank had no mouth in his ashen, peeling face. That's when I noticed his eyes. His eyes were the most terrorizing feature about him. There was no white in his eyes, just darkness. A darkness darker than any black color that one can comprehend. "I'll make you a deal," I said again, forcing myself to stay steady in the presence of this creature. "Leave the boy alone, forever, and you can have me." The demon tilted his head as if perplexed, contemplating my offer. After a minute that seemed like hours, he straightened up and spoke. Not with his mouth, as he didn't have one. No, he put the sound directly into my skull. In that deep, evil voice that had previously come from my son just the other night. "It's a deal." And in an instant, he was gone. The next morning, Richie's fever had subsided, just like that. The color had returned to his skin and he was eating solid food and laughing like a toddler should for the first time in days. The doctors admitted that they were baffled, but happily discharged Richie later that day. My wife calls it a miracle, but only I understand the dismal truth. I can feel it starting, the illness, or whatever you call it. My fever is spiking, and I can't stop sweating. My energy is leaving me. I barely manage to walk up the stairs into the office. Even now, I feel as if I might pass out. I cannot hide my condition from my wife for too much longer. It is only a matter of time until I am the one in the hospital bed, as the doctors try tirelessly to explain what is happening. Only I won't make a miraculous recovery as Richie had. No, I'm certain that I will die. That was the deal I had made after all. I gave up my own life to save my son. But before I do perish, I'm putting this story on every parenting and paranormal forum I can find on the web. I know how this sounds, I realize it seems crazy. But I'm reaching out to all parents who might be seeing the signs. I plead with you, please do not play along if your child has some sort of imaginary friend. Stop it before it's too late. Find someone who can expel that evil from your home and your child. But please, for the sake of you children, I beg for you to not allow this creature to take a hold of your child. I found her at Walmart. She was in the clearance section, tucked away on the bottom shelf. I don't know why I noticed her, but something about her caught my eye. Maybe it was her long, golden hair, or maybe it was her blue dress, the same color as my daughter's eyes. Whatever it was, I felt drawn to her. I picked her up and examined her. She was a doll, about 2 feet tall, with porcelain skin and rosy cheeks. She wore a blue dress and white shoes, and her hair was in pigtails. I turned her over and saw the tag on the back, $5.99. I knew I had to buy her. My daughter, Lily, loved dolls, and I knew she would love this one too. When I got home, I wrapped the doll in pink tissue paper and placed her in a gift bag. I couldn't wait to give it to Lily. The next day was Lily's birthday. She was turning 6. After dinner, we gathered around the table and sang happy birthday as she blew out the candles on her cake. Then it was time for presents. I handed her the gift bag with the doll inside. She squealed with delight and tore open the tissue paper. When she saw the doll, her eyes widened. "Oh, Mommy, she's so pretty," she said. I smiled. "I'm glad you like her." Lily hugged the doll to her chest and whispered something in her ear. Then she set the doll down and ran off to play. That night, after Lily had gone to bed, I was sitting on the couch watching TV. The doll was on the coffee table in front of me. I couldn't take my eyes off her. Suddenly, I heard a noise. It sounded like a soft giggle, like a child's laughter. I looked around, but no one was there. Then I realized the sound had come from the doll. I shook my head. I must be imagining things. The next night, I heard the giggle again. This time, I knew it was real. I looked at the doll, and her lips were moving, as if she were trying to speak. I picked up the doll and examined her. Her mouth was closed, but her eyes seemed to be alive. They were a bright blue, the same color as Lily's. Over the next few nights, strange things started happening. I would wake up in the middle of the night to find the doll sitting at the foot of my bed, staring at me with those bright blue eyes. Or I would come home from work to find the doll sitting on the couch, as if she had been watching TV. I started to get scared. I didn't know what was happening, but I knew it wasn't normal. One night, I decided to get rid of the doll. I wrapped her in a garbage bag and put her in the trash can outside. Then I went to bed, hoping that was the end of it. The next morning, I woke up to find the doll sitting on my dresser, as if she had never left. Her blue eyes seemed to be staring right at me. I screamed and ran out of the room. I knew then that I had to get rid of the doll for good. I took her back to Walmart and left her in the clearance section where I had found her. As I walked away, I looked back and saw her sitting there, watching me with those bright blue eyes. I've never gone back to that Walmart since. I work the overnight shift at Walmart. It's a boring job, but it pays the bills. Most nights, nothing interesting happens. But one night, something weird happened. It started when I was stocking shelves in the pet food aisle. I heard a noise, like something was dragging across the floor. I turned around, but there was nothing there. I shrugged it off and kept working. But then I heard the noise again, closer this time. I turned around, and that's when I saw it. There was a creature standing in the aisle. It was tall and thin, with skin that looked like it was made of black rubber. Its eyes were glowing red, and it had long, thin fingers that ended in sharp claws. I froze. I didn't know what to do. The creature started moving towards me, its claws clicking against the linoleum floor. I turned and ran. I didn't stop until I was outside the store, panting and shaking. I didn't tell anyone about what I saw. I thought they would think I was crazy. But then, a few nights later, it happened again. I was working in the electronics department when I heard the noise again. I turned around, and there it was, the creature. It was closer this time, and I could see its teeth, long and sharp like needles. I ran again, but this time I didn't make it out of the store. The creature was too fast. It grabbed me by the arm and pulled me towards it. I thought I was going to die. But then, just as suddenly as it appeared, the creature was gone. I was standing in the aisle alone. I quit my job at Walmart the next day. I never saw the creature again, but I still have nightmares about it. I don't know what it was or where it came from, but I know I never want to see it again. I work at Walmart. I've worked there for about 2 years now. It's a decent job, but it can be pretty boring at times. Most of the time I just stand at the front of the store and greet customers as they come in. But a few months ago, something strange happened. I was working the night shift, and I had just finished stocking the shelves in the pet food aisle. It was around 3 a.m., and the store was completely empty. I started walking back to the front of the store when I heard a noise. It sounded like someone was pushing a shopping cart. I turned around, but there was no one there. I thought it was just my imagination, so I kept walking. But then I heard it again. This time, it was louder. I turned around, and there it was, a shopping cart, rolling down the aisle by itself. I thought maybe it was just a malfunctioning cart, so I went to push it back to its proper place. But as soon as I touched it, it stopped moving. I looked around, and there was no one there. I started to feel uneasy, so I decided to leave the aisle and head back to the front of the store. As I walked, I noticed that the store looked different. The aisles seemed to be longer, and the signs above them were different. I thought maybe I had just taken a wrong turn, so I turned around to head back. But I couldn't find my way back to the pet food aisle. Every aisle I went down seemed to lead to a dead end. The signs above the aisles were in a language I didn't recognize, and the products on the shelves were all unfamiliar to me. I started to panic. I didn't know how to get back to the front of the store, and I couldn't find anyone to help me. I kept walking, hoping to find a familiar face or a way out. But the more I walked, the more lost I became. The store seemed to go on forever, with no end in sight. I started to feel like I was in a maze, and I would never find my way out. Eventually, I heard someone calling my name. It was my coworker, Lisa. She had been looking for me since I disappeared from the front of the store. She led me back to the pet food aisle, and when I looked back, the store was back to normal. Lisa told me that I had been missing for over an hour. To me, it felt like I had only been gone for a few minutes. I don't know what happened that night, but I do know one thing: I never want to be lost in Walmart again. Abandoned by Disney. There was once a theme park built by the Disney Corporation, deep in the heart of a dense forest. The park was never finished and was left to rot, abandoned and forgotten by the world. Years passed, and the park became overgrown, with vines and trees creeping over the once gleaming rides and attractions. But strange rumors began to circulate about the park. Locals whispered of ghostly apparitions wandering the grounds at night, and of strange noises coming from the park after dark. Despite the warnings, a group of adventurous teenagers decided to explore the abandoned park to see if the rumors were true. "I heard that this place is haunted," said Sarah, as they entered the park. "Yeah, right," replied Jake, rolling his eyes. "There's no such thing as ghosts." They entered the park, and at first, everything seemed normal. The sky was clear and blue, and birds chirped in the trees. "This place is creepy," said Rachel, as they continued deeper into the park. "Come on, guys," said Jake, trying to hide his growing unease. "There's nothing to be afraid of." But as they continued deeper into the park, they began to realize that something was not right. The once colorful buildings were now covered in graffiti, and the once pristine grounds were littered with trash and debris. The rides were rusted and decrepit, and the once lush gardens were now overgrown and wild. Suddenly, the group heard strange noises. They heard the sounds of children laughing and playing, but when they looked around, there was no one there. They heard the sounds of animals, but again, there was nothing to be seen. "What the hell was that?" asked Rachel, her voice shaking. "I don't know," replied Sarah, looking around nervously. "But I don't like it." And then, the ghostly apparitions appeared. They were the spirits of the workers who had died building the park, and they were angry. "Run," shouted Jake, grabbing Rachel's hand. The teenagers tried to run, but the spirits were too fast. They chased the group through the park until finally, they caught up with them. "What do we do?" cried Sarah, as the spirits closed in. "I don't know," replied Jake, as the spirits reached out to grab them. The teenagers were never seen again, and their bodies were never found. It is said that they were taken by the spirits, and that they now haunt the abandoned park. To this day, the park remains abandoned, a forgotten relic of a bygone era. Those who dare to enter the park never return, and the ghostly apparitions are said to still roam the grounds at night, seeking revenge on those who would disturb their eternal rest. There was a game on Roblox that was like nothing else on the platform. It was called the Demon's Playground, and it was rumored to be cursed. The warnings and rumors of its dangers only made the game more intriguing to players like Alex. Despite the rumors, Alex was curious and decided to play the game. As soon as Alex entered the game, he was struck by how different it was from other Roblox games. The graphics were glitchy, the colors were muted and dull, and the world was shrouded in darkness. Despite this, Alex explored the game, eager to see what it had to offer. However, the more he explored, the more he realized that he was not alone. A dark figure began to stalk Alex, getting closer and closer with each passing moment. The sound of its heavy breathing filled Alex's ears, and he could feel its hot breath on the back of his neck. No matter how fast Alex ran, the figure was always one step ahead. Alex's heart was pounding in his chest, and he was filled with a growing sense of fear. He was relieved when he finally stumbled upon a room, but as soon as he entered, the door slammed shut behind him. The room was filled with the bodies of other players who had been trapped in the game, and the walls were covered in their blood. Alex realized that he was face to face with the demon that haunted the game, and that there was no way out. The demon reached out and grabbed Alex, pulling him into the darkness. Alex screamed, but no one could hear him. His Roblox account was deleted from the platform, and he was never seen again. The game The Demon's Playground was eventually removed from Roblox, but rumors persist that it still exists on the dark web, waiting for its next victim. Some say that if you search deep enough, you can still find the game and play it, but no one knows what will happen to those who dare to enter. The main character and his wife found a message written by an unknown person in the bathroom mirror. They call the police and conduct a search of the house, but the police find no evidence. What will happen next? Where do these strange and frightening messages come from? I used to love showers. The wait time seemed to stop when I was taking one. I'd get in the stall, turn on the hot water, and forget about all. 2-minute showers weren't for me. I was the type who'd run the hot water until it started to lose its heat, then turn the valve a half inch towards the H, and then another turn, and another, until I had drained every last drop of warmth from the water tank. If my wife Mary followed me into the shower, she'd scream, "I hate you." It's like a waterfall in Iceland, as barely a drop of hot water sprayed from the shower head. I'd laughingly tell her to suck it up. She'd tell me it was unfair, since I was the one who needed the cold showers. Eventually, she figured it out and switched to mornings and left the evenings to me. Now, I'll never go near a shower stall or a bathroom sink ever again. I've perfected the sponge bath and using baby wipes to keep clean. It's been a year since it happened, and to this day I still wonder if it did. Mary's gone, though the police and her family still look for her, hoping she'll turn up. I know she never will. I couldn't tell the cops what really happened, because if I did I'd be locked up in the insane asylum. As it is, most people think I had something to do with her disappearance, and I don't blame them. I never put in the effort to look for her, wandering the nearby woods with the other searchers calling out her name. I knew it was a waste of time. You might even remember the story from the evening news. Think Indiana, the fall, about a year ago. The reporters came and camped out for about 2 weeks, until nothing new came up and interest waned. Mary's parents don't talk to me anymore. Deep down I think they suspect I murdered her. I didn't squelch their suspicions after I sold the house so soon after her going missing, but the truth was I could never live there after what I saw. I felt bad when another family moved in, but what was I supposed to do? Warn them? About what? Even I don't know how to explain it. It started with a shower. I just finished one of my usual steamy, water-filled moments. I stepped out of the stall, and there on the foggy bathroom mirror above the sink were the words, "Hello there. When can we meet?" written on the mist-covered glass. It made me smile, knowing Mary had snuck in and left a little note. She was always doing that, the little things they say that make a relationship work. Mary would fill the gas tank in my car when she drove it, stock the snack drawer with double-stuffed Oreos, my faves, and leave little notes around the house about how she loved me. I'd open up my closet and they'd be a post-it with a heart drawn on it stuck on my suit, or another stuck on the cereal box when I went to grab breakfast. The next day after dinner, while clearing the table, she playfully slapped me on the ass, "Aren't you the little pervert, sneaking into the bathroom while I'm taking my shower this morning?" Who, me? Well, who else? Writing a little message on the steamed-up mirror. I slid out the washing machine drawer and stacked some plates, all the while a look of confusion was on my face. What did I write? "As if you don't know, my little voyeur. How long were you watching?" I'm serious, I have no idea what you're talking about. You wrote, "I see you," on the mirror, with a little smiley face under it. I stood up from my hunched position at the washing machine and stared at Mary. I wasn't in the bathroom this morning. I didn't leave any message. I was in the bedroom getting dressed. I never went in. Mary laughed, but I didn't. The smirk on her face faded, replaced by a genuine look of worry. What? Wait? Serious? I nodded, not sure what else to say. We stood there in silence, trying to process our shared realization. Then I asked her, "The night before, did you leave a message for me?" Her hand went to her mouth, worry replaced by fear. She collapsed onto a chair. I knew her answer. Her hand trembled, she looked to the stairs that led to our bedroom and master bath. "I want to call the police. Now, right now," she blurted. "And tell them what?" "Someone has left notes for us on our bathroom mirror." "Yes, exactly that." "And how did this happen?" "I was in the bedroom from the time you went in until the time you came out. No one snuck past me. There's no window to our bathroom. So how did this steamy note-writing intruder get in?" Mary's voice cracked with apprehension. "I saw this on TV, it's called frogging. Someone is in our house, secretly here, and we don't know." Either you call the police or I do. I won't stay another night in this house unless they come here and check it out. 3 hours later, 4 police officers searched our house from every corner of the basement to the back of every closet and under every bed and even every cabinet. They declared the house clean, like some exorcism. They also checked the Ring camera and other surveillance cameras around our property and went so far as to ask our neighbors if they could review their cameras, and not one person was spotted near our house over the last 2 days and nights. Of course, it was the good news, bad news scenario. The good, there's no prowler secretly living in our house. The bad, there was no clue as to how those messages showed up on our bathroom mirror. One of the older cops, his mustache as thick as a raccoon's tail, pulled me aside and asked if I was playing games with Mary, doing a little gaslighting for some crazy-ass purpose. I told him I wasn't, and I couldn't even think of a reason why I'd want to do something like that. He said he'd seen it all and nothing surprised him anymore. Mary used the guest bathroom that night, and only after I checked it out. There really was no place to hide in there, except for the cabinets under the vanity. I opened them up and assured her there was no one there. I stood guard outside as she took her shower. The bathroom door left open. When she was done, there were no messages on the mirror, which calmed her down considerably. That and a margarita with a Valium. I put off my shower until the morning, as Mary was still too wound up to be left alone. We crashed on the bed and she fell asleep in my reassuring arms. She kept asking, "How then?" It doesn't make sense. How? The only thing I could tell her was, we're going to figure it out, and one day we'll both say how stupid it was and laugh ourselves silly. Mary kept shaking her head, not buying my half-ass explanation. Hell, it wasn't even an explanation, just something to say to make her feel better. I wasn't scared like she was, more confused, and for a half a second, I even thought maybe she was gaslighting me. Like the cops said, nothing surprised him anymore. That night I had a dream about a primary school teacher of mine, Mrs. Beale. She was old, grandma-like, with a shock of white hair swirled up in a bun. In the dream she was wearing a floral print dress and writing on a blackboard. But instead of using chalk, she was using someone's chopped off finger and scribbling with its blood. She kept writing the word, death, death, death. I woke up sweating and popped a Valium and joined Mary in a deep drug-induced slumber. Better sleeping through chemistry. Mary left for work before me in the morning. Sprinting out in a rush, wanting to leave the house as quick as possible. My mind was a little hazy from the Valium. The turmoil of the night before seemed like it happened weeks ago. I had no problem using our master bathroom for my shower. As with the guest bath, there was really no place to hide, except for inside the vanity. I wasn't giving in to crazed fear, but to be honest, I did a quick check just in case. It was all clear, unless this person was hiding in the first aid box. The hot water felt good. There really is something to the idea of washing away your troubles. I was able to relax and enjoy, even though I did find my gaze drifting to the bathroom mirror, keeping an eye out for any messages. When I turned the water off, the bathroom was hot, steamy, and note-free. I grabbed a towel and made my way into the bedroom, dried off, and put on my underwear and socks. I returned to the bathroom to brush my teeth. I stopped. My body went rigid, my heart sped up, and in an instant I went cold. Drawn on the bathroom mirror was a frowning smiley face. No words, just the grin. It wasn't there when I walked out of the shower. And no one had gotten past me into the bathroom while I was pulling clothes out of the closet. I wasn't watching the whole time, but I would have heard them or caught them in the corner of my eye. I stood there in the doorway, my eyes drifted down to the vanity and the 2 knee-high doors. Could someone be hiding in there now? I stepped backwards, not taking my eyes off the bathroom. Backing up to the bed, my hand reached behind the headboard and found my trusted burglar deterrent, a 32-ounce Louisville Slugger. It felt good in my fingers as I walked towards the bathroom. Bat in hand, I flung open the vanity doors and was confronted by a hairdryer, the first aid kit, makeup mirror, and heating pad. No contortionist killer. I looked up to the smiley face on the mirror, which now looked melted as the steam began to condense and drip. It looked like it was crying. Then I heard the noise. It was coming from the drain in the bathroom sink. It sounded like giggling, someone laughing. I leaned down, tilted my head, my ear inches away. When I felt the puff of air come out of the drain and blow against my cheek, I whipped my head up and backed away. What the hell was that? Not sure what to do, I was frozen in the moment. Then I ran down into the basement. The shelves under the stairs. I scanned them, looking there on the top shelf. I grabbed the red plastic jug, the drain cleaner. I turned to head upstairs, but I stopped. My attention drawn to the drain pipe running along the basement wall, there was something in it. Moving. I could hear it. 3 steps at a time I bolted up from the basement and then the foyer stairs. Out of breath and my hand shaking, I twisted off the cap of the caustic liquid and poured it into the sink. Every last drop. Then I got out of there. I thought I heard a scream. But I was too far away in the bedroom, so I couldn't really be sure. My head was spinning. Nothing made sense. There was no way what I told Mary the night before was ever going to be true. We're going to figure it out one day and laugh ourselves silly. I wasn't laughing. After about 10 minutes, I moved towards the sink. All of the drain cleaner was gone and there weren't any sounds rising out of the little hole at the bottom of the basin. The steam had cleared from the mirror and the smiley face was gone, it was just my face now. Looking confused and slightly embarrassed. Did I really hear anything? Drain monster or not, I had to get to work. The red plastic jug was thrown into the recycling bin and I jumped into my car. As I backed out of the driveway, my eyes locked onto our bedroom window. I wasn't sure what I was expecting to see, but I was glad nothing was there except the curtains. I called Mary at lunchtime, not to tell her what happened, but to see how she was doing. I'd never let her know about the smiley face on the mirror and what I thought I heard. If I did, she would never set foot in the house again. Nope, I'd take this to my grave. Mary sounded better on the phone. The night's sleep and the morning sun seemed to let her get her bearings. She only had one request: please be home before me. I just want to make sure I'm not alone in the house, at least for the next few days. Sure, you got it, babe, in my best reassuring voice. The rest of the afternoon, I was pretty useless at work. My brain was performing mental gymnastics trying to explain what happened. I spent most of the day in my cubicle searching the internet for answers. After going down rabbit hole after rabbit hole, there was something that seemed to explain, or at least might explain, what was happening. I found an article about when some people get new carpets, they can have strong reactions to the chemicals in the rugs. Bingo! We had just recarpeted the living room and bedrooms, no more than 2 weeks earlier. Mary had been complaining of headaches recently, although I hadn't experienced anything out of the norm. The article listed the effects of the chemicals. You could have blurred vision, nausea, and even hallucinations. Everything seemed to check. That evening over dinner, I pulled up the carpet article on my phone and read it to Mary. You could see the tension melt away with every word I read. She started talking about how forgetful she had been lately and mentioned the headaches and even some weird dreams. Which of course, struck a chord with me, recalling my blood-finger chalkboard from the night before. Even though it was fall, and a chill was in the air, we ran the air conditioner that night to help filter out the chemicals. We threw open the windows on the second floor as well. It was cold, but at least we were getting clean, healthy air. I took my shower that night, without incident. No smiley faces, frowning faces, or messages appeared on the mirror. We snuggled up close, broke out another comforter to combat the breezes coming out of the vents and windows, then fell asleep with the knowledge that we had figured it out. Mary turned to me, kissed me on the forehead, my hero, such the detective. You were right, we will laugh about this. Mary took her shower that morning. I was getting dressed when I heard the thump. It sounded like she dropped the soap in the stall. I called out, "Are you okay?" But there was silence. Mary didn't say anything. Thinking she didn't hear me, I yelled this time, raising my voice over the sound of the radio that was on and the gurgling stream flowing from the shower. You okay, babe? There was another thump. I made my way into the bathroom. I didn't rush in, there was no reason to think anything was wrong. She hadn't screamed. Even now I can't truly understand what I saw, partly because it happened so fast and also because it was so terrifying. The cover to the drain was gone, and sticking out of the hole were two very thin hands, skeletal, covered in a bruise-colored skin? I wasn't sure what to call it. The arms were elongated and seemed to be able to stretch and bend like the pipe cleaners you played with as kids. There were 5 fingers to a hand, with fingernails that were cracked and yellow and seemed to have brown sludge caked under each nail. The hands had a grip on Mary's head, that's all that was left. Her body was gone. Somehow that thing had managed to tear apart my wife and drag her legs, arms and torso down the drain in a matter of moments. Only her head remained, the hair wet and stringy and Mary's eyes wide open in a perpetual state of shock. Whatever creature, thing, or being that was down inside the pipes wielded a supernatural strength, because the last I saw of Mary, those hands were crushing her skull, flattening it and then dragging it into the black hole on the floor of the shower. The sight of it was horrifying, but the sounds was just as terrible. The bones crunched and cracked. It sounded like someone stepping on a bag of potato chips. I wanted to vomit, but my utter shock seemed to freeze my body. I couldn't even move. She was gone. The water, which was still running, washed whatever bits of flesh and bone and blood down the drain. Just like Mary, I didn't scream. I just mumbled out her name, Mary. I managed to inch towards the shower. Step by step. I pulled open the glass door and shut off the water. I leaned into the stall. My eyes focused on the drain, the round abyss, no more than 5 inches wide. I saw nothing but blackness and red drops around the edge of the hole. There was a sound, a rhythmic drip, 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 as water leaked from the shower head. Nothing else, except the weather guy on the radio telling me to take an umbrella because it might rain that afternoon. I had to sit down. The room was starting to spin. When I turned to leave, I saw the words written on the bathroom mirror, "Goodbye." I fainted. When I woke up, I heard a voice. It was the weather guy on the radio, once again telling me it was going to rain. Which meant I had been out for at least 15 minutes, since that's how often they updated the weather. It could have been longer, maybe I had been unconscious for more than one weather report. And then it dawned on me, the thing was still in the drain, maybe it was coming for me next. I bolted up and half crawled and half stumbled out of the room. I saw the clock on the nightstand. I had only been out cold for 15 minutes. My phone, where was my phone? I needed to call the police, that's what I need to do next. I scampered around the room, looking for it. I saw it on top of the dresser. My thumb was about to press down on 1 to finish the sequence 911. When I stopped. What was I going to tell them? As I replayed the horrifying moment in my mind, I realized how insane it was and how insane I would sound trying to convince someone what I saw. I remembered the police officer from the other night questioning me as to whether I was gaslighting Mary, as if I was intentionally trying to make her upset. And now a few days later I was calling to say she was dead, killed by some drain monster? They'd then find bits and pieces of her in my pipes and her DNA splattered along the shower walls. It wouldn't be the drain monster they'd be looking to arrest, but me. I put down the phone and replayed every crime documentary Mary and I had watched on Netflix. I knew what I had to do. Although I was terrified. I made my way back into the bathroom and the shower. I wiped everything down with bleach and cleaners, rinsing everything clean. I had stacked 2 50-pound weights from our workout room on top of the drain to give me some sense of security as I scrubbed and washed, leaving just a little space for the water to rinse away. I wiped down the weights after and placed them back on the workout bench. I got dressed. One of the things I'd learned from all those crime shows was to keep your normal routine if you wanted to avoid being a suspect. I'd leave for work as I always did, just before Mary usually left. The surveillance cameras would catch me pulling out of the garage. It would be a little later than normal, but I'd explain it away to the Valium we had taken. I knew I needed an answer for every question the police would ask, an alibi for every moment and minute from this point on. When I sat inside the car to leave, I noticed Mary had left a yellow post-it note on my steering wheel, "I love you." I was crying when I pulled away from the house. My mind was racing as I drove. I knew they'd review the surveillance footage and never see Mary leave. But there were blind spots the cameras didn't cover, and maybe her abductor knew about this and used those blind spots to take her away. That would be my story. In less than an hour I had gone from happily married man to some sort of mastermind criminal covering up a murder I didn't commit. Over the next few weeks, our block became a media circus. Every alphabet network camped out and captured every coming and going at the house. I was a suspect at first. The thought was I had killed her in our home. But they couldn't find the body. The GPS in my car and cell phone records showed I never made any stops after I left the house or when I came home. So, I couldn't have disposed of Mary on my drive. Besides, Mary had called her mother just before she took her shower and I left a half hour after the call. Forensic pathologists said that it wasn't enough time to cut up a body and flush it down the toilet. And besides, the DNA evidence I'd leave from such a butchering would have been impossible for the detectives to miss. When these accusations flew, I never wavered or panicked. Because I knew I didn't kill Mary. There were also no reports of us fighting or evidence of affairs. They didn't uncover a hidden insurance policy I might have taken out on my wife. We were by all accounts a loving, devoted couple. I also knew they'd never find the body. The prevailing thought was she was taken from the house and kidnapped by some crazed serial killer. They weren't that far off in their assessment. It was a crazed killer, but it was living in the pipes of my home. Or maybe it had moved on to another house in the county, using the pipes and drains to come and go as it pleased. Who knew how this thing lived and existed? I moved out of the house and stayed at a local hotel, telling everyone it was too painful to live there anymore, too many memories. But really it was one memory, the one that was seared into my brain and left me weeping in fear every night. Mary's head being crushed like an empty soda can and dragged down the drain. I made sure my room was on the top floor of the hotel, thinking it would be harder for the thing in the pipes to crawl and shimmy up 25 floors. Even so, I began my sponge bath and baby wipes routine that night. Not to be too graphic, but when I went to the bathroom, I did my business in the plastic garbage pail and then flushed it down. I was terrified of sitting on the toilet. Eventually, the media circus pulled up its tent stakes and left town. There was nothing new to report. As of now, Mary's disappearance is an ongoing police investigation. I even call every few days, asking what leads they're pursuing, playing the concerned husband, but I know they'll never find her. I don't feel guilty about my fake concern. Like I said, I didn't kill her. Although, I did feel pangs of guilt when I sold the house. Of course, I didn't warn them, but I convinced myself that the creature would never kill again in the same home. It had survived and thrived by being stealthy. 2 missing persons from the same house would cause a few people to start to question what was really happening. A part of me thought I might have caused Mary's death, that somehow I angered the creature with the drain cleaner by burning it and causing it pain. To be honest, up until it killed Mary, it had only been playful interactions, the thing leaving silly messages. Maybe my actions enraged it and it struck back the only way it knew how. I moved out of the county. My commute is now twice as long, but peace of mind is more important. I actually went to town hall and spoke to the Bureau of Refuse and Sewage to make sure my new home was in no way connected to my old home via sewer pipes. They assured me it wasn't, and they also said they'd never had anyone ask that question before. It's been over a year and I haven't kept in touch with any of my neighbors or in-laws. When I did, our conversations were always about Mary, which meant I had to relive what happened and what I saw over and over again each and every time we talked. I couldn't do it anymore. It had to stop. Leaving town only fed into their suspicions about me having something to do with her disappearance. So be it. I loved Mary with all my heart and soul, and no amount of suspicion would ever change that. I knew what I knew. Things were getting back to some semblance of normal in my new home. And then last night everything changed. I was making pasta. I drained the spaghetti, then went to the fridge to grab the grated cheese. When I turned, the steam from the boiling water had caught the window above the sink. In the moisture condensed on the glass, someone or something had drawn a smiley face. I'm in my car now, driving. Maybe another state is far enough. Or a cabin in the woods with no plumbing. I don't know.